St. Pete or Sarasota? Which of these Florida cities is best? Both offer beautiful beaches, amazing drinks and dining, and world-class amenities for residents and tourists alike. In this video, we'll compare each city in 10 different categories, and we'll tell you which is our overall favorite and why. Welcome back, guys. For those of you who are new here, we're Jamie and Skylar, and we lived in Sarasota for 7 years before moving to St. Pete 3 years ago.
And during that time, we spent countless days exploring both cities and sharing our adventures with you here on this channel.
And along the way, we have received many video requests, but I think one of the most popular requests has to be a video comparing St. Pete and Sarasota. So that's what we're gonna do today.
And make sure you stick around to the end where we'll not only share which is our favorite and why, but also why the answer is definitely not gonna be the same for everyone.
Now the first category up for comparison is the location. Now both St. Pete and Sarasota are located along Florida's Gulf Coast, with around 40 miles and 40 minutes of drive time separating the two cities.
And due to their close proximity to each other and the Gulf of Mexico, the weather in the two cities is virtually identical.
Both cities are conveniently located just miles from beautiful Gulf Coast beaches. Downtown Sarasota is only 5 miles from Lido Beach, 7 miles from Siesta Key Beach, 13 miles from Longboat Key, and 20 miles from Anna Maria Island.
Downtown St. Pete, meanwhile, is located just 8 miles from Treasure Island, 9 miles from St. Pete Beach, 11 miles from Madera Beach, and 14 miles from Fort DeSoto.
So as far as proximity to beaches, it's a bit of a toss-up. Downtown Sarasota has the closest Gulf Beach access on Lido Key, but St. Pete has access to more beaches within 15 miles or less.
And we should also mention that downtown St. Pete has beaches within walking distance on Tampa Bay. And while those beaches definitely aren't as nice as the Gulf beaches, they do still offer a great way to beat the heat.
Another important factor to us when comparing locations is access to major cities. And St. Pete is much closer to a major city with only 23 miles separating downtown St. Pete from downtown Tampa. And if you're into the Disney scene, St. Pete is only 106 miles to Orlando.
And while Sarasota is around 35 miles further from Tampa and Orlando, it's also around 35 miles closer to the major Atlantic coast cities of Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and also the Florida Keys.
St. Pete is also closer to major international airports in Tampa and Orlando, but we do want to point out that both St. Pete and Sarasota do have smaller airports that are serviced by Allegiant.
And we personally love flying Allegiant out of both St. Pete and Sarasota because the flights are generally quite affordable, and we love the convenience of flying out of those smaller airports. And we should also note that Sarasota is located just 55 miles from the Punta Gorda Airport, which is even smaller than the St. Pete and Sarasota airports and also serviced by Allegiant.
So in regards to location, it is really hard to pick a winner. St. Pete gains points for being closer to Tampa and Orlando, but Sarasota gains points for being closer to Miami and the Keys.
Now, if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with St. Pete just due to its closer proximity to Tampa, but this one's honestly just a matter of personal preference. Now, the next category that we're going to compare is one that both of these cities are famous for, and that is their beaches.
Now, if you've already watched our top 10 beaches video, then you already know that our favorite beach destination in the Tampa Bay area is Anna Maria Island, and that is 12 miles closer to Sarasota than St. Pete.
And our number 3 beach destination is Siesta Key Beach, which is only 7 miles from downtown Sarasota, and also probably has the softest sand of all the beaches in the area. Plus, we both love Siesta Key Village.
But our number 2 overall beach and the best beach for beach bars is St. Pete Beach, which is only 9 miles from downtown St. Pete. Plus, Fort DeSoto, Treasure Island, Madera Beach, and Clearwater Beach are all closer to St. Pete. And like we mentioned earlier, St. Pete also has several beaches on the bay. Overall, I have to lean towards the beaches in Sarasota because in my opinion, Anna Maria Island and Siesta Key offer some of the most beautiful beaches in Florida. Also, I absolutely love the island vibes, and you can actually find free parking.
For me, as much as I hate having to pay for parking at the St. Pete area beaches, you can now avoid that by taking the Sunrunner from downtown St. Pete to St. Pete Beach, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But as much as I love our beaches here around St. Pete, I have to lean towards Sarasota beaches as well, due to their proximity to Anna Maria Island and Siesta Key, and also 2 of my favorite lesser known beaches, Longboat Key and Casey Key.
But as with location, exploration, beaches are really all about personal preference. Now, if you're needing a little bit of help deciding which beach is best for you, we would recommend watching our top Tampa Bay area beaches video after this one. Now, before we go any further, we want to remind you that our ratings on each category are based on our own experiences living in both cities as well as our research. If you'd rate these cities differently in any of the 10 categories, let us know which one and why in the comments. Our next category is transportation, and unlike our first two categories, I don't think there's much debate over the winner in this one.
Yeah, so we already touched on airports, and I think I actually prefer Sarasota's airport over St. Pete's, but both are small and super convenient, and we definitely have to still give the nod to St. Pete for airports just due to its closer proximity to both Tampa and Orlando.
Now, another thing we have to talk about is the traffic. It might be surprising to you to know that Sarasota is only about a fifth the size of St. Pete, but in our experience, the traffic there is much worse.
For sure. One thing we definitely do not miss about living in Sarasota is that traffic. And while it is pretty bad year-round, it gets really bad during snowbird season. It seems that the infrastructure there just is not set up to handle the growing population.
And while you can certainly experience traffic jams in St. Pete, navigating downtown St. Pete during rush hour is much easier than downtown Sarasota. Now, one of the main reasons the traffic in downtown Sarasota is much worse is because the only bridge that goes to Lido Key and Longboat Key runs right through downtown. So not only do you have people who are commuting for work, but you also have people that are trying to get out to the beaches.
Yeah, and unlike Sarasota, the beach access roads around St. Pete are miles from downtown. And we also have to give the public transportation nod to St. Pete due to the new Sunrunner, which can now take you all the way from downtown St. Pete to St. Pete Beach and back.
And as we showed you in that video, the buses offer Wi-Fi, charging stations, bike racks, and they're wheelchair accessible. And these buses can get you from downtown St. Pete to the beach in 35 minutes when the traffic isn't terrible. And the best thing about it is that it's free until November of 2023.
Yet another area of transportation that St. Pete definitely wins is bikeability. Now, Sarasota does have the Legacy Trail, which is a really nice bike trail, but it does not connect with downtown Sarasota. And honestly, biking to downtown Sarasota can be a little bit sketchy.
All right, guys, so after recording this, we did discover that an extension to the Legacy Trail connecting it to downtown Sarasota was completed in March of 2022, which really makes the trail much better in our opinion. Now back to the video. Now, as awesome as the Legacy Bike Trail is, St. Pete has it beat with the Pinellas Trail, and we ride that all the time here in downtown St. Pete. We actually rode it 80 miles all the way up to Tarpon Springs and back. So if you're interested in seeing that experience, we would recommend watching that episode after this one.
Now, after 3 topics, I think we have our first clear winner as St. Pete easily takes transportation. So after 3 categories, we have 1 win for each city and 1 tie.
We do still have 7 more categories to discuss, but before we do that, we wanted to take a moment to invite you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. You can probably already tell we have a ton of Sarasota and St. Pete content, and we do plan to create more in the future, and we'd hate for you all to miss any of it.
Our 4th category is drinks and dining, and if you follow our channel at all, you'll know that we love to eat and drink. And we found no shortage of great spots to do just that in Sarasota and St. Pete.
But if you are from cities like New York, New Orleans, or LA, or any other foodie city really, you might not be overly impressed with the options in Sarasota and St. Pete.
That's true, but if you are into fresh seafood, especially shellfish or whitefish like grouper and snapper, then you're gonna find some amazing spots to eat in both Sarasota and St. Pete.
Now, as far as the variety of dining options, you're gonna find a lot more in St. Pete, simply because it is a larger city. Now, for a town of around 50,000 people, Sarasota does offer a lot of high-end dining options that you'd really expect to find more in a larger city.
Yeah, you're definitely not gonna go hungry in either city, but I gotta give the nod to St. Pete because I love dining on the water, and the barrier islands around St. Pete have some amazing options for both food and drink right on the beach.
Yeah, and you don't really find much of that around Sarasota.
Yeah, you really don't. And if you know me, you'll know that I also love breweries. And you can find around 10 of them near downtown St. Pete within just a couple miles of each other, where I think there's only around 4 breweries total in Sarasota, and they're all pretty spread out.
So overall, I'd have to give the edge to St. Pete too.
So that's 1 more clear win for St. Pete.
Now let's move on to our fifth category, which is parks and gardens. Now I've got to admit that back when we lived in Sarasota, we really weren't that interested in visiting parks and gardens.
No, I think we started getting into it when we first moved to St. Pete and COVID started getting really bad, because at that time going to parks and gardens was about all you really could do. But once we did get into going to them, we never looked back.
Yeah, we can definitely tell you that the parks and gardens here in St. Pete are awesome.
Yeah, you got Boyd Hill in South St. Pete where you can hike all the trails and also see the birds. You got the free Arboretum downtown by the bay. You've got all the other downtown bayfront parks, plus Whedon Island and its amazing paddling trails. And you also have all the plants and animals at the Sunken Gardens that we both love.
And of course you've got Fort DeSoto Park with its amazing beaches. Plus from there you can hop on a ferry to Shell Key Preserve or Egmont Key State Park.
Now Sarasota does have some beautiful waterfront parks of its own, and it also has Myakka State Park to the east, which has some great hiking trails and also some otter. And to the east it has Myakka State Park, which is a huge park offering some great trails and some alligator spottings.
And while we still haven't visited the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens, we have heard nothing but great things about it.
With that said, I think that Fort DeSoto Park is the ultimate Florida park. It offers great beaches, awesome hiking trails, biking trails, water sports, and camping, and Sarasota just doesn't have anything that can compete with that.
And I agree, Fort DeSoto is the difference maker for us in this category. So halfway through our comparison, we have 3 wins for St. Pete, 1 win for Sarasota, and 1 tie. But we do still have 5 more categories to cover.
And before we move on to our 6th category, we do want to thank all of you who voted in our poll, which asked which area you all prefer between Sarasota and St. Pete.
So far, around 250 of you have voted on that poll, and around 75% preferred the St. Pete area.
Now we should mention that our channel's audience might be just a little bit biased because we do likely have more subscribers from the St. Pete area than from Sarasota, so you might want to take those results with a grain of salt.
But we also did receive a lot of comments on the poll from people who weren't able to choose one area over the other because they enjoyed both areas. And we can totally understand that because we love both areas too. Now, before we move on to the last 5 categories, I do want to take a moment to thank all of you who have sent your well wishes, and also to those of you who have reached out with suggestions for treating sciatica. It has been really great to be back on camera again, but I am still dealing with it. So that means I'm not able to stand or sit for very long periods of time. So due to that, Skylar's going to take over for the next several categories while I take a break, but I hope to return at the end of the video to help wrap things up.
All right, so our 6th category is arts and music, and St. Pete has a great art scene with the Salvador Dali Museum, James Museum for Western and Wildlife Art, the Museum of Fine Arts, the Museum of History, and the Florida Holocaust Museum, all located within a few blocks of each other in downtown St. Pete. St. Pete's also full of awesome murals, most of which are created during the St. Pete Mural Festival each year. But Sarasota is home to the John Ringling Museum, which is often voted amongst the best museums in the entire world. Now, admittedly, neither of us are that big into art, but we are big into music, and both Sarasota and St. Pete have a great live music scene. St. Pete has the Janus, an open-air venue in the heart of downtown St. Pete that attracts a variety of big-name musicians. The Mahaffey Theater is another smaller venue that gets some big-name acts. Also, Vinoy Park in downtown St. Pete is an awesome spot to catch a festival right on the water, and there's so many small venues both downtown and out on the beaches where you can catch one of the area's talented local musicians. Now, Sarasota also gets some big-name musicians at the Van Weasel, but it was the local talent that really blew us away when we lived there, and we could not believe how a city of just 50,000 people could have so many talented local musicians. Plus, the musicians seem to be a really tight-knit community, and we just haven't experienced a music scene quite like the one in Sarasota in any other city. Now, as much as we do still enjoy the music scene in St. Pete, it is one of the things that I miss the most about living in Sarasota. So this one might be a little bit controversial, but we gotta give the nod on music and arts to Sarasota, mainly due to the local music scene. And while it may not be able to compete with the amount of great music and art overall in St. Pete, the quality, at least in our opinion, is second to none. Now let's move on to the 7th category, which is price and cost of living. So overall, you're not gonna find that much of a difference when you're shopping at the grocery store or at the mall in Sarasota versus St. Pete. Both cities do have a lot of higher end stores to choose from, as well as a lot of discount stores. I will say though that we spent less money on groceries when living in Sarasota because we did the majority of our shopping at Debt Detweilers, which has great prices on local produce as well as meats and seafood. Now, since we still don't have a Detweilers here in St. Pete, we often find ourselves driving across the Skyway Bridge to shop at the Detweilers there, or else spending quite a bit more money on our produce at the local Publix here in downtown St. Pete. Now, as far as dining out goes, we think that Sarasota might be slightly more expensive on average, but you can find plenty of good, reasonably priced spots in both cities. And you won't find a difference in sales tax between the two cities, as both have a 1% county tax on top of the 6% state tax. But one place that you will see a pretty big difference in price is the cost of the average home. So according to Zillow, the current average home sale price in Sarasota is $455,000, which is around $113,000 or 33% higher than the average home sale price of $342,000 in St. Pete. But if you focus on the downtown areas only, the cost of comparable homes do seem to be pretty similar. Now, looking at rents, a higher end 2-bedroom apartment will run you in the $3,500 to $4,000 range in downtown Sarasota, but will run closer to the $2,500 range once you get a bit outside of downtown. And we actually found it to be pretty similar in downtown St. Pete, with the higher 2-bedroom apartments again running in that $3,500 to $4,000 range, with the average prices dropping under $3,000 once you get just outside of the downtown area. Now, when you look further outside the downtown areas, you do start to see more of a difference. As Zillow reports, average median rents of around $3,100 for the entire city of Sarasota, compared to just $2,200 for the city of St. Pete. Now, I think the main reason for this difference is that St. Pete as a whole is older than Sarasota and does have larger and more lower income neighborhoods. So while you may be able to find lower price housing in St. Pete, it may or may not be in a neighborhood that you'd consider living. Now, if you look at bestplaces.net, you'll see that both Sarasota and St. Pete rank pretty close to each other in terms of cost of living, and both rank just slightly higher than the national average, with Sarasota being more expensive for housing, but actually cheaper in a few other areas. So overall, we're calling the cost of living as another toss-up, because yes, you can find more inexpensive places to live in St. Pete, but when you compare apples to apples, you'll find that the costs are actually quite similar. Now, since a lot of you out there have families, a huge factor in determining which city is best for you is going to be family friendliness. So for this topic, we're going to take a quick look at both crime and school ratings. Now, according to usnews.com, Sarasota actually ranks 9.3 out of 10, with a much lower than average crime rate when compared to similarly sized metro areas. Now, St. Pete gets lumped in with Tampa, but also gets a great rating of 9.3 when compared to similarly sized metros. So overall, both metros do appear to be much safer than average according to usnews.com. But if you go over to neighborhoodscout.com, you'll see a much different story. As you can see here, Sarasota gets a 7 out of 100 ranking with an average of 6.46 violent crimes per 1,000 residents, compared to the Florida state average of 3.92 violent crimes. St. Pete also ranks quite poorly with 6.93 violent crimes per 1,000 residents, and slightly ahead of Sarasota's rate of 6.46. St. Pete does actually have a lower property crime rate, however, giving it an overall crime index rate of 9 out of 100 compared to 7 out of 100 for Sarasota. Now, to be fair, I do think that the US News ratings paint a more accurate picture, as they rate cities in comparison to similarly sized cities. Whereas neighborhoodscout.com appears to be comparing larger cities not only to other large cities, but also to small cities, small towns, and even rural areas, which are almost always going to have a much lower crime rate. So do what you want with that data, but we are definitely not able to say that one city is significantly better than the other one in terms of crime. Now let's move on to schools. According to greatschools.org, Sarasota has a total of 55 schools, and overall they rank quite well, with 43% ranked above the national average, 35% ranked around the national average, and just 22% ranked below the national average. Meanwhile, the Pinellas County School District, where St. Pete is located, has a total of 159 schools, with 28% of them ranked above average, 31% of them ranked around average, and 40% ranked below average. Now, you can go much deeper into these school ratings and look at them on a school-by-school basis, and you would without a doubt find some really good and some not so good schools within both cities. But overall, it does appear that the Sarasota County schools are a little bit better as a whole. So while we're still not quite sure which city is actually safer, we are at least pretty sure that Sarasota's public school system is a little little bit better. So when it comes to family friendliness, we gotta give this one to Sarasota. Now with just 2 categories left, Sarasota has made a comeback, with both cities now having 3 wins and 2 ties. And our 9th category is gonna be another important one for most of you, jobs. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the current unemployment rate in Sarasota is 2.3% compared to 2.4% in St. Pete. Now both of these rates are obviously great and compare favorably to both the 3.5% national average and the 2.6% Florida state average. Now looking into the average wage, ZipRecruiter.com reports an average salary of around $55,000 in St. Pete and around $43,500 in Sarasota. Zippia.com meanwhile reports an average median salary of around $47,000 in St. Pete compared to $45,000 in Sarasota. Finally, SalaryExpert.com reports an average salary of around $59,600 in St. Pete compared to $59,300 in Sarasota. And while there is quite a bit of variance among these sources, they all do seem to agree that the average salary in St. Pete is higher than the average salary in Sarasota. And when you also consider St. Pete's proximity to the much larger job market right across the bridge in Tampa, we have to give the slight edge in the jobs category to St. Pete. Now with just 1 category left, St. Pete does hold a slight edge, and for this last category, we're gonna bring back Jamie.
Hey guys, our 10th and final category is the overall vibes of these 2 cities. Now they may be similar in many ways, but we found their energies to be quite different. And that was one of the main reasons we moved to St. Pete 3 years ago.
Now if you spend much time in both places, you've likely found that Sarasota has a slower pace and a sleepier vibe than St. Pete. And a big part of the reason for that is probably due to the average age in Sarasota being 6 years older than that of St. Pete.
And when you add in the snowbirds and other part-time residents, that average age gap between the 2 cities gets even bigger.
But don't get us wrong, there are definitely times when we really love that slower paced environment that you'll find in Sarasota, and especially out on Siesta Key.
But the great thing about St. Pete is that it has a bit of something for everyone. So if you are looking for that slower paced old Florida vibe, you can head out to places like Paso Grill and Madeira Beach.
And if you're looking for a more high paced, eclectic vibe, you can find that in downtown St. Pete, out by the pier, whereas it is quite a bit harder to come by in Sarasota.
We also love that downtown St. Pete really supports local businesses and appeals to all ages and demographics, whereas downtown Sarasota seems to appeal a bit more to retirees and tourists.
And for those reasons, we have to give the City Vibes category to St. Pete. Now, in case you lost count, that gives us 2 categories that were ties, 3 categories for Sarasota, and 5 categories for St. Pete, making St. Pete the winner of this city-to-city comparison.
Now to be fair to Sarasota, we did absolutely love living there. And we might not have ever moved if we had never discovered our love of St. Pete. And we do often talk about how we might end up back in Sarasota in our later years.
And as we mentioned earlier, just because St. Pete's better for us doesn't mean it's better for you. And if you prioritize things such as schools or beaches, or just prefer the slower vibe that Sarasota offers, then Sarasota might be the perfect city for you.
And if you still need a little more help deciding which city is best for you, then check out one of these playlists next. Thanks for watching!